I still feel the cold of that morning on my skin when I think about it. The hallway smelled like bleach and pencil dust, and the big clock above the trophy case kept shouting the time, 7:42, 7:43, like it wanted me to hurry up and fail again. I had just come out of the headmaster's office where they told me I had flunked every single test for the whole term. Not one pass, not even close. And right there, in the middle of my shame, the janitor, black coat, black eyes, black boots that squeaked on the waxed floor, looked up from his mop and said the 6 words that changed everything. Billionaire's son failed every test until the black janitor taught him one secret. He said it soft, like he was reading my mind, not talking to me. Then he walked on, humming low like he had just planted a seed and trusted the dirt to do the rest. Grandma, I need you to know how that sentence felt inside my chest. It was a slap and a hug at the same time. I was the billionaire's son, the kid whose dad owned half the city's glass and steel, yet I couldn't even spell steel right on my last quiz. And there he was, the man who cleaned up after us every night, naming my story before I knew it had a name. I followed him. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way he said secret, like it was warm bread straight from the oven. I followed him down the back stairs that smelled like sour mop water and pine. He didn't look back. His steps were steady, like he knew I'd come. At the bottom, he pushed open the boiler room door, and that old iron monster growled at us both. Inside, the air felt thick, like breathing through a wool blanket. He pointed to a cracked plastic chair beside the furnace. "Sit," he said. I sat. He took a rag from his pocket, wiped his hands, and then he did something I'll never forget. He reached into the trash bag he was carrying, pulled out my last math test, the one with the big red 12% at the top, and smoothed it on his knee as if it were a love letter. He told me why I missed problem 4. He asked me why I missed problem 4. His voice had no anger in it, just room. I stared at the paper, at the place where I'd written 17 times 8 equals 96. My cheeks burned. I mumbled that I'd mixed up the numbers. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Then he folded the test into a tiny square and tucked it into his shirt pocket right over his heart. That's when he told me the first piece of the secret. But before I give it to you, Grandma, I have to back up a little so you can see the whole map, because the secret isn't just one thing. It's a chain of things, like paper clips hooked together. And it started long before I ever set foot on that fancy school. You remember, don't you, how Mom used to call me Little Lightning? Not because I was fast, but because storms always trailed after me. I broke everything I touched, toys, promises, hearts. Dad was always flying to Dubai or Tokyo, and when he was home, he kept his eyes on stock screens, not on me. I had tutors and bow ties who spoke like dictionaries. They tried to pour knowledge into me like I was a cup with no bottom. After a while, they stopped looking surprised when the cup stayed empty. The school itself looked like a palace made of glass. Every hallway had a new color of marble. The other kids smelled like fresh cologne and new money. They called me trust fund toddler behind my back, even though I was already 16. I laughed along, but inside, I felt like the janitor's mop bucket, full of dirty water nobody wanted to touch. I met the girl with the paint-stained fingers in art class. We weren't supposed to talk during critiques, but she passed me a folded scrap of paper. On it, she had sketched a tiny bird with its wings tied by a red ribbon. Underneath, she wrote, "Me, if I stay here." I drew a cage around the bird and passed it back. She smiled with half her mouth. That was the first time I felt seen, not for my last name, but for my lines on paper. Her name was Micah, like the shiny flecks in sidewalk cement. She lived across the river where the roofs sagged and the buses coughed black smoke. I watched her go from the tower window of the library, wishing I knew how to cook anything except excuses. Then came the night Dad's helicopter crashed. They said it was fog. For 3 days, I sat beside his hospital bed while machines beeped his heartbeat. He looked small under the white sheet, like a boy wearing a grown man mask. When he finally awoke, the first thing he asked was if the quarterly reports were ready. I told him yes, even though I had no idea. He closed his eyes again, satisfied. That's when I understood that success and love spoke different languages in our house. I went back to school hollow. My grades slipped further. Teachers sighed when they saw my name on the roster. The headmaster called me in again and again. Each time I sat in the leather chair across from his polished desk, I felt like a stain on expensive fabric. The last time, he handed me a letter stamped with the school seal, expulsion, effective immediately, it said. I folded it into the same pocket where I kept the tiny stub of the bus ticket Micah once dropped. That night I wandered the halls like a ghost. I ended up outside the janitor's closet. The door was cracked open. Inside, one bulb swung from a wire painting gold circles on the floor. He was there, polishing the brass numbers on a trophy. I stood in the doorway until he looked up. "Are you ready to learn?" he asked. No hello. No how are you holding up. Just that question, like he had been waiting for the exact second I broke. I nodded. He motioned me to sit on an upside-down bucket.
He told me his own story then, Grandma, and I want to hand it to you the way he handed it to me. Slow, careful, like a fragile glass bird. He said he had once been a math teacher in another city, another life. He loved numbers because they were honest. 2 + 2 never lied. But one winter, a boy in his class brought a gun to school. The boy was scared, cornered, and the janitor, he asked me to call him Mr. Gray, though that wasn't his real name, stepped between the gun and the rest of the kids. The gun went off. The bullet went into the ceiling, but the sound went into his ears forever. After that, the school board thanked him with a pink slip. Too much paperwork, they said. Too much risk. He lost his house, his wife, his faith in chalkboards. He rode buses until this school took him on at night. No questions asked.
He paused and looked at me so deep I felt my ribs shake. Numbers still don't lie, he said, but people do. And the biggest lie we tell ourselves is that our mistakes own us. Then he tapped the folded test in his pocket. This 12%, it's just a number. It's not your name. That was the second piece of the secret. He told me to meet him the next morning at 5:30 a.m. in the gym. When I showed up, the place smelled like yesterday's sweat and new hope. He had taped blank sheets of paper on the walls. Each sheet had one math problem. Simple ones first. 2 + 2, 7 × 6. He handed me a marker the size of a broom handle. Write the answers big enough the ceiling can read them, he said. I laughed, the first real laugh in weeks. The squeak of the marker sounded like a bird learning to sing. We did that every dawn for 2 weeks. My arms ached, but my mind started to stretch, like muscles after a long sleep. Then he added harder problems, fractions, equations, word problems about trains and apples and people running in opposite directions. I wrote them on the walls until the gym looked like a cave of numbers. And each time I got one right, he'd nod once, just once, and the nod felt better than any A+ I had ever seen. One morning, after we'd scrubbed the walls clean again, he reached into his toolbox and pulled out a tiny brass compass, the kind sailors used 100 years ago. He put it in my palm. Third piece, he said, north is not always at the top of the map. Sometimes it's inside your chest. I closed my fingers around it, feeling the needle quiver like a heartbeat. I carried that compass everywhere. When Micah saw it dangling from my backpack zipper, she asked where I got it. I told her about the early morning gym sessions. She listened, her paint-stained fingers twisting a strand of hair. Then she said, I want to learn with you. So the next morning, she showed up in her brother's too big hoodie, hair still wet from the sink. Mr. Gray smiled like sunrise. He taped 3 blank walls for her, one for spelling, one for history dates, and one for the watercolor equations she loved to paint. The gym became our secret country. But secrets don't last in glass palaces. The headmaster caught wind of it. Security cameras saw lights on at dawn. One day he marched in, face red as a stop sign. He pointed at Mr. Gray. You're not authorized to tutor students, custodial staff only. Then he turned to me. And you, expulsion still stands. Your father has been notified. Dad's jet landed that night. He walked into the library where I was hiding between shelves. His eyes were still glassy from painkillers, but his voice was sharp as broken crystal. He said, "I built an empire so you wouldn't have to mop floors. Yet here you are, chasing janitors like they hold the keys to the kingdom." I tried to explain about the compass, the walls of numbers, the way my mind felt when it finally fit. He didn't hear. He just signed the transfer papers to a boarding school in Switzerland. Flight leaves Sunday. I ran. Out the gates, across the river, through the streets that smelled of fried onions and wet concrete. I found Micah on her front porch, feeding crackers to her baby brother. When I told her, she closed her eyes. A tear slid down, leaving a pale trail in the dusk. Then she opened them and said, "We still have tonight." We met Mr. Gray in the gym at midnight. The moon slanted through the high windows like silver bars. He didn't look surprised to see us. He had already rolled out a big sheet of canvas on the floor. On it, he'd painted a map. No countries, just numbers and colors swirling together. In the center sat a tiny red heart. He handed us brushes. "Fill in the parts you still don't understand," he said. So we painted. Fractions became feathers, equations turned into roads. The red heart grew bigger every time we laughed. Near dawn, he pulled out an envelope and gave it to me. Inside was a single sheet, my original 12% test. But now, next to every wrong answer, he'd written a small note in red pen. 17 times 8 is 136, but 96 is how many nights you thought you were alone. You divided 3/4 by 2/3 upside down, but even upside down trees still grow roots. Each mistake had become a door. He told me to keep the paper, but not to frame it. He said, "Paper burns, memory doesn't." Sunday came with rain that sounded like pebbles on glass. My suitcase stood by the door. Dad's driver waited. I looked at the compass in my hand, at north, then I looked at Micah, at her paint-stained fingers now speckled with gold from the map we'd made. I looked at Mr. Gray, who stood in the rain without an umbrella, water running down the lines of his face like tiny rivers. I stepped off the porch into the rain. My shoes squelched. I walked past the car, past Dad's stunned driver, all the way to the bus stop. The city bus hissed open. Micah climbed on first, then me. Mr. Gray stayed behind, smiling like a man who had already read the last page of the book and knew it ended well. "Grandma, we rode that bus for hours until the city thinned into fields and the fields into sky. We talked to the driver, a woman with laugh lines deep as riverbeds. She told us about night classes at the community college. She told us about grants and work study and how the library there stayed open until 2 a.m. Micah squeezed my hand. I felt the brass compass warm against my palm. We enrolled the next day. The classroom smelled like chalk and coffee, not marble and fear. The teachers wore jeans. They learned our names before they looked at our wallets. I got a job shelving books at night. Micah painted murals on the cafeteria walls. Birds without ribbons, cages with doors flung wide. We studied under buzzing fluorescent lights until our eyes crossed, then walked home under real stars. Months later, a letter came. Dad had tracked me down. He wanted to meet. We chose a small diner halfway between his world and ours. When he walked in, the bell over the door jingled like a shy hello. He looked older, smaller. He carried a folder. Inside were my new transcripts, A in calculus, A- in literature, A+ in art history. He stared at them like they were written in another language. Then he looked at me, at my calloused hands, at the compass still hanging from my keychain.
"I was wrong," he said. The words came out slow, like he was tasting them for the first time. "The kingdom isn't glass towers. It's whatever you build with your own two hands." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a check. Big number, lots of zeros. He slid it across the table. "For tuition," he said. "No strings." I didn't take it right away. I looked at Micah. She nodded, one small nod, the same nod Mr. Gray gave me when I got a problem right. I tore the check in half, not out of anger, but because I wanted him to see the edges, proof that paper burns, memory doesn't. Then I told him about the janitor who used to be a teacher, about the gym walls that became a sky, about the canvas map still drying on our apartment floor. Dad listened. When I finished, he folded the torn halves back together and tucked them into his pocket. A reminder to listen better. Grandma, last week I graduated, community college, top of the class. Micah sat in the front row, her little brothers on her lap wearing paper hats she'd painted like crowns. Mr. Gray came too, in a borrowed suit, the sleeves a little short. When my name was called, I walked across the stage and felt the red heart beating under my gown. After the ceremony, we found a quiet spot under an oak tree. I pulled out the old 12% test. The paper was soft from folding and unfolding. I read the red notes one last time, then let the wind take it. It fluttered like a wounded bird, then landed at Mr. Gray's feet. He picked it up, read it, and smiled. Then he handed me a new sheet, blank this time. "Next chapter," he said. "You write it." I looked at Micah, at Dad who stood awkwardly nearby, at the compass pointing somewhere new, and I understood the last piece of the secret, the one that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Failure isn't the end of the story. It's just the part where the hero decides to turn the page. Grandma, I know you're reading this on your porch, the one that creaks in the same spot every time you rock. I can almost smell the honeysuckle from here. I want you to know that every time I wanted to quit, I heard your voice in my head, soft as summer sheets. Keep walking, child. The road loves a stubborn traveler. I'm walking. We all are. And because you taught me to listen for kindness in unlikely places, I found it in a boiler room, on city buses, between library shelves. If anyone watching this feels like a 12% walking around in human skin, tell them the secret isn't hidden in marble halls. It's in the quiet hands that hold your compass when you forget which way is up. So here's my tiny CTA, the way the YouTube folks like it. Hit that comment button and tell me about the janitor in your life, the one who taught you the secret you didn't know you needed. Share this story with someone who thinks they've run out of chances. And if you haven't already, tap subscribe, because Micah and I are painting a new map every week, and we'd love for you to walk the roads with us. I'll write again soon. Until then, keep the porch light on. My north is still pointing home. With all the love my crooked heart can hold, your lightning.